Today we're going to talk about love, and by love I mean the filmy love, which Indians are very familiar with. In fact, our idea of love story comes from movies. It rarely comes from books or poetry. No, our idea is pretty much rooted in what the movies have taught us over the years. And in the film industry, Hindi cinema has played a massive role in this regard. And this is so because of the restrictions that we as Indians have in our social structure, in our economic structure, and it's very difficult for us to choose our lover, right? Even in the most urbane setting, you'll notice that people still wonder whether they can end up with the person that they love because the religious divide, the caste divide is so strong that we can't really think beyond a certain, you know, freedom that is allotted to us. In this regard, Hindi film uh, cinema industry has definitely tried to push the boundaries, although not very successfully, but it has at least tried. And over the years, over the decades, uh, our very definition of how an ideal love story should be, how people are supposed to be with each other, all of these things are pretty much a factor of what we watch in the movies. So it's interesting that the movies are supposed to reflect the society, but it's the other way around when it comes to Hindi cinema and how love story is perceived. But it's also interesting, like how there are convenient love stories and there are inconvenient love stories. We all know what happened to Maniratnam when Bombay was released, or the aftermath of Dil Se, and how things kind of go into disarray if certain norms are not carried out, because certain rules are kind of written in stone in our country, and even cinema isn't allowed to touch that. So there are certain more than restrictions, right? But this is on the societal side. But then there are certain stories which don't even touch society. It's completely what do you say? It's beyond society. It's almost tragic how certain stories are not even touched. They are not supposed to find completion. Like to call them Bollywood's incomplete stories, because they are so intense, but they are so nullified by the surrounding of the entire setup, whatever the story is, whatever the movie is, that they never complete. There are many examples, but I can grant you three prime examples. In Sholay, the relationship between Amitabh Bachchan and Jaya Baduri. This is a very inconvenient love story between a man who seemed very, disinterested in in romance, and he has a fascination for a widow, and we know that this story is not going to be convenient. So what happens in the end? Amitabh Bachchan's character dies. Uh, we find a similar, layering in Dil Chahta Hai, where uh, Akshay Khanna's character falls in love with the much older Dimple Kapadia's character. And what happens? Dimple Kapadia dies. So it's very convenient, right? That somebody has to die so that that completion doesn't take place. The story remains incomplete. Years later, then we had Rang De Basanti, and Amir Khan falls in love with Alice Patton's character, and Amir Khan dies in the end, which is interesting because we haven't had a lot of such examples where a brown character falls in love with a white character and they have completed that arc, right? So it was interesting that Amir Khan's character dies in the end. One trivia that some of you might be aware of: Alice Patton is the daughter of the last governor of Hong Kong. Uh, anyway, that was besides the point. The whole premise of this particular video is like how some stories are conveniently incomplete, because if they get completed, then it might create some sort of, like I mentioned earlier, disarray. But we are not sure whether it falls in the societal bracket, or if it falls in the political bracket, or if it falls in the economic bracket. But for some reason, they just don't fit in. So such stories are never led to complete. And on that incomplete note, I wish you a good week ahead.